Hey y'all. So today we've got Royal Briar versus Dash, and let's get right into it. With Dash kind of being the villain right now of the CC meta, I'm finding that Icelander it probably isn't the best pick, so I'm taking a look at Royal Briar to see if that's a good enough answer. And yeah, let's see how this game goes. So I won the die roll and chose to go first, which is honestly the going first, going second decision in this matchup is already quite fascinating because both decks have a potential to set up like amazing things turn zero. Like Dash can set up a second pounder or a Teklo core, and we can set up like Chalmont Heroic with an embodiment of lightning, or Rune Chant plus Chalmont Heroic, etc. But if either whoever goes first, if they miss on that setup, like what I did just now, like I didn't get embodiment of lightning or a Chalmont Heroic turn zero, then I feel really behind because my opponent starts with tempo, right? Because this is an aggro mirror, the person who goes second kind of generally has starts with the tempo. So the going first, going second is already quite fascinating. I find in this matchup. We did get to Arsenal a smashing good time, so that's quite nice. Again, like I said, with Dash being the sort of villain of this meta, smashing good time is something I think I want to try, especially since I can creepers it out since I'm a Runeblade, and that's I can like suddenly pop the item right without them expecting it, and that has a lot of value. So anyway, so since we drew up into Chalmont Heroic and a Cashin, I'm just taking all the damage my opponent's sending at me. I'm forced to block this T-Bone with Grasp, obviously. Interesting thing, you can't actually block with your headpiece over here because it just doesn't have a block value, as opposed to like Snapdragon Scalers, which has like a 0 block value, which you can like put in front of things. If it just doesn't have a value, you can't use it to block. So I had to give up Grasp there. Okay, so we start with Cashin, and we have a 6-card hand basically with a Chalmont Heroic, and that's what makes Royal Briar so good, right? But here's where I went first, didn't find a good setup, and now I'm 13 life behind. So I really need this the next couple of turns to help me catch up with his life lead, and drawing Cashin Chalmont Heroic is one of the ways to do that. So Cashin, Chalmont Heroic have the embodiment, and then we start with a snatch because I really want my opponent to start blocking, and we also can follow up with an erase phase, which is probably the most nutty thing that this deck can do, is that the turn you set up Chalmont Heroic, if you have backed up with a Cashin, your turn where you set up Chalmont Heroic still isn't weak. Like this is a 7 damage snatch followed by 9 damage erase phase, and I'm keeping Chalmont Heroic. This is the turn 0 of my Chalmont Heroic. Which is, normally not the case. Normally the turn where you play a Chalmont Heroic, that turn is a lot weaker because you just expended a bunch of cards on that. But, I get to do this, and my opponent gave me a bunch of armor to try and, like pivot back into me, I suppose. But, the erase phase tells them, no, you can't do this. Okay, so opponent blocks this and then keeps 1 card. So I'm guessing they're just gonna Arsenal that, or, maybe it's a 0-cost boost thing. Turns out it's a red zipper hit, and they're using it to fire the pistol for 2, which is slightly inefficient from our opponent. They could have just used that to block for 3, instead of using that to present 2. It would have been 1 more point of value for them. But anyway, so this is what they elected to do. And the interesting thing about Smashing Good Time is that it's actually really bad to pair that with on-hits. So the previous turn we had Snatch and Erase Phase, which are both on-hits my opponent probably wants to block. In which case, they're probably going to block that, and I don't actually get to Creepers surprise out the Smashing Good Time. So we also didn't have a good enough resource curve to actually play it. So I held on to it, and then now I get to surprise it out because it's unlikely my opponent's just going to block the vanilla damage on Arcanic Crackle. And then that's really strong, and I get to blow up the Teklo Pounder, which is basically 4 extra points of value for me. Yep, so we move into reactions, and I could just play this, which will also buff my next attack by 3 because it was from Arsenal, and I get to blow up the Pounder. Cool, so unfortunately I don't get to swing Thorn here. We're a little low on action points, but, I'm still using most of my hand. I'm just having an Arsenal. Like, no cards left extra in my hand here. Also, the nice thing about Crackle is that, sometimes you get into these turns where you can't swing your Thorn. And the reason I do Crackle here instead of Thorn is because I want my Chalmont Heroic value. It's plus 3 damage if I send the Crackle. But the nice thing is that I still dealt the Arcane with the Crackle to keep my Creepers around. Okay, so opponent comes out with high speed impact, and this we have to block. It's, you know, +3 damage. It's basically you block 4, but you're getting like 7 points of value. So we have to block this, and we've already blown up the items, so the smashing good time in my hand is not very useful. So I go ahead and block with that, along with the embodiment and my last block on Grasp of the Arknight. So that being said, we are a little short on non-attacks in this hand, but that's where Belittle comes in and just, you know, solves that problem for us. So you're about to see what happens with that. Yeah, so at this point, the only thing I'm worried about will be like a Pulse Wave Harpoon that'll just completely mess up the hand. But luckily, all they had was, well, I mean, a 0 cost for 4 go again is still really strong. Because they get to use their last floating to pistol for 2, so this is actually representing a further 6 damage here. Yeah, but we just take it, we're just going to use the yellow Snatch in our hand as our resource card, and get to play out the Belittle into an attack. Yeah. So we do this, and we get to find Minnowism, which, with Creepers, solves our action point problem. The amazing thing about Belittle is that not only is it a does it give you a non-attack to turn on your Thorn, it gives you a non-attack to play out with Creepers, and when you Creepers out as Minnowism, you go up to 2 action points. So I get to Creepers out as Minnowism, send my Snatch for 6, which my opponent almost certainly wants to block, and still Thorn afterwards, and then Arsenal the Gloomveil. So yeah, so that's exactly what I do here. And I get the Thorn because of the Tunic counter. And the thing about having the extra action point here is that, like, you know, I have the play to Thorn if they block the Snatch, which they probably will. But if they don't, the extra action point, you know, lets me, you know, use the card I get. So just, this is a sort of like just very strong line that this Belittle Creepers Briar can do. Yep, and they block with their Harpoon, which I'm very glad to see. And that's sort of the advantage I found that Briar has over Dash, is that if I find that Briar makes Dash block more than Dash makes Briar block, if that makes sense. And that helps with getting rid of important cards like Pulse Wave Harpoon. Yep, and then we could have played Gloomveil and then used Thorn, but since we're not threatening lethal, playing out the Gloomveil here doesn't actually do much more than just threaten 3 damage. Whereas I might draw into like a Chalmount Heroic, and then the Gloomveil becomes a lot stronger. The thing about Gloomveil is that it's very trivial to give it go again usually. So I do want to make sure, like, I just keep an arsenal and maybe I get a better play out of it later. And if I don't, it's still the base like 3 damage go again, which I usually almost always can get. And I am rewarded for that play because we bricked. We drew 4 blue non-attacks here, which is obviously really, really bad. The classic Runeblade brick, and our opponent played BIOS update, whatever, that card, and boosted 0 to 60 and actually hit an item. So that's just 2 very unfortunate things happen at the same time here. We drew really badly, and our opponent got a good boost off and managed to get a free Teklo car. Opponent's like cosplaying as a Data Doll right now. So ideally, I would say the best thing to do with this hand is do like Earthlaw Surge, Minnowism, Gloomveil, Thorn. So I block with 1 blue here and use the others to send that, which is not a great turn, but it's typically probably what I would decide if the life totals weren't this low. But because the life totals are this low, I decided I want to force my opponent to block. And so I decided I'm just going to do a double Earthlaw Surge into Gloomveil into Thorn, which presents a total of 13 damage. Whereas if I block with Earthlaw Surge here, and then do Earthlaw Surge, Minnowism, Gloomveil, Thorn, I'm getting like 14 points of value. But I'm taking the 1 value loss here to force a card out of my opponent. Which, going back to what I said about the Pulse Wave Harpoon thing, is very relevant. Especially since now they have like 2 free resources from the Teklo card that they just got. So that's what I like to do, which honestly, I'm not sure if that is the correct line. Maybe the better line might have been to block out, but I was also trying to be cognizant of the fact that I want to try and keep my creepers around. And so being able to swing Thorn Basically keeps the creepers around. Yep, so opponent just blocks 4 here, which, I wanted a card out of them, and I did get a card out of them, and it probably is gonna eat everything else and try and stop me from keeping too many cards on my turn. Although they are at 2, which is, very, very close to just dying to, like, Thorn's inevitability. And then we draw into what I consider sort of like another brick, because with my opponent at 2, if I can swing Thorn, then they have to give me like 2 cards. They need to give me a card to pitch to Arcane, and they need to give me a card to block with to block the Thorn physical. And the thing about this Belittle deck is that as long as I have Belittle and a Belittle target, it's actually very easy for me to activate Thorn. I can just go Belittle, fish out the Minnowism, and then play the Minnowism, and then just activate Thorn. Like, I don't use a Minnowism buff, but it just satisfies the criteria of having played a non-attack for the arcane damage from Thorn. But we draw into no belittle targets in his hand, which is really, really rough. Yeah, now opponent starts with Pulse Wave Harpoon. They did also crack the Goliath earlier, so this payload is now coming in for 8 with Dominate. We do have Chalmant Heroic, which blocks for 4 because of the embodiment. Also, I mean, at this point in the game, is way too much of a tempo loss to try and set up Chalmant Heroic anyway. So that's like I wanted to block with that anyway. Yeah, and then so we actually do have a chance here to keep 3 cards. Right, our opponent isn't threatening lethal because we can Chalmant Heroic and put 2 pieces of armor in front of this. Oh wait, no, sorry, no, they're gonna pop the accelerator, and use the pistol to get a card from us. So no, never mind. Yeah, so we go ahead and just put the Tunic and the Creepers. Even though just putting Creepers would have been enough to stop lethal, the thing I'm worried about is T-Bone. We saw a red T-Bone already. If my opponent's playing the yellow T-Bone, then that's very, very annoying if I'm at 1, and with Tunic up, because I don't need to put Tunic up and give them a card. So I'll just put the Tunic there to save myself a life now. And on our turn, we're just gonna... I made a misclick there. I activated Grasp because I was a bit fixated on, oh, my opponent has no more Arcane Barrier. But no, the much better play is just to belittle into Thorn. Without... even though Thorn doesn't have the Arcane damage, it's just that'll guarantee take an extra card from them. Whereas they can just take the Runechan damage and just give me 1 card for belittle. However, taking the extra card when they got that free Teklo card doesn't feel as good, right? So I kind of need to hope that my opponent bricked to be able to get out of this situation. So if we keep going along this like 2 card exchange, it's likely that I will lose. Like that's a worse position for Briar to be in than for Dash. But there are certain 2 card hands that Briar has that will allow me to activate Thorn. So Sonata, and if it hits, and then a go again attack into Thorn, or Gorganian Tome. So these are the things I'm looking for, and we draw into Gorg Tome with a go again attack in Belittle. So I have 2 cards to block with here, the Force of Nature and the Pulse, and I need to hope that the Gorg Tome draws me a yellow or a blue, so that I can Belittle into Thorn. So that is the out that I'm looking for here, and let's see if I get it. Okay, so very fortunate for us, our opponent can't use the last card. I mean, that's sort of the trade-off that Dash needs to make. Like, Brian needs to make the trade-off of having non-attacks and attacks. Dash needs to make the trade-off of having a bunch of items alongside their boost attacks, right? So, cool. So we went Gorgtome, and it thankfully did draw us a blue, so now we can belittle into Thorn, and our opponent has Noble AB, and then so we get there just barely. We had to get lucky the sort of the last turn there. But at the same time, we did also sort of break pretty hard earlier in the game, which put us in this position. So, and our opponent did also get very fortunate with their Teklo Core banish off the top. So yeah, so there we go. That's some Royal Briar into Dash. Very, very, very close matchup. I think obviously Cash-In helped us a lot from our how we were kind of behind early on. We like lost 13 life because we chose to go first. Cashin helped us take that back, and as well as a smashing good time that blew up the opponent's Techno car. So those are very important. So yeah, that was the game. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.